Welcome to Module 5. So we've made it through the first quarter of the semester in the class of BioSkills, and now we're going to switch gears a little bit. We first, in Module 4, learned about some of the science behind cognition, how people learn, and hopefully you heard some things that were helpful to you. And in the next couple modules, we're going to focus specifically on studying and testing and focus on strategies for success in those fields. And so I'll give the typical BioSkills warning, which is if you're already getting really good grades, you're happy with how you're studying, everything's working for you, then I hope you'll learn maybe something you haven't heard before, or maybe a new technique you might want to try. But I would definitely recommend that you just keep doing what you're doing. If, however, you are putting in the work and you're not getting the results out that you were hoping for, a lot of times it's because you're possibly studying in an inefficient manner, or basically a way that's not targeted to learning, long-term learning, which we talked about in Module 4. And so if you're not getting the grades you want, I do recommend you try some of these different techniques and focus on what you're doing and whether it's working or not. So the idea of metacognition, how do you know you know? If you keep doing the same thing and you're not getting the grades you want, then you need to try something different, because typically it's how you're studying or what's going on during the day of the test, or how you're testing. And so we'll talk about that and some strategies, okay? But just a fair warning that obviously these are just ideas and strategies I'm going to try and give you. You got to try them out and see if they'll work for you. You have to find the best method that works for you, because not everybody's identical. All right, so this will be a two-part topic. So we'll do part 1 today, and then in Module 5, and part 2 will be in Module 6. Okay. So to get started, I'm going to show you a quick video, and again, this is coming from LSU Center for Academic Success, and this is a good website to visit if you're always looking for new study strategies. And this is called the study cycle, and it's got 5 steps to it. And what I want you to do, most of your homework today actually is kind of what I call the in-class activities. So I'm going to stop periodically through the presentation and ask you to write down something. Now you can just jot down your answers in a notebook if you'd like. You can actually print the homework or get the homework on a different screen and do the homework while you're doing this, or you can just fill in the homework after you've watched the video. It's really not that big of a deal either way. So these 5 steps in the study cycle are important because every single one of these is helping maximize your performance, and I'll touch on a few of these after the video and tell you why I think they're kind of the most important things to focus on when you're studying. Okay, so let's watch the video.
Presented by the Center for Academic Success. The study cycle, a process for learning. Many students have shared that their learning improved after implementing this system. The study cycle consists of 5 steps: preview, attend, review, study, and assess.
Repetition is the key. Preview, attend, review, study, and assess.
Step 1. Preview. The purpose of previewing is to give you the big picture. Skim through your test, review bold and italicized print, formulas, graphs, and other images. When you have the big picture, details become obvious and lectures are more interesting. Step 2. Attend. Go to class. Although obvious, attending lecture is an essential step. Combined with previewing, you will feel better prepared and more connected. Your notes will be more organized and complete. Step 3. Review. After class or within the same day, take 8 to 10 minutes to review your notes. This process helps strengthen and transfer information from short-term to long-term memory. Every time you review your notes, you are strengthening content and improving confidence.
Once I started reviewing my notes for biology right after class, I found that I was learning and retaining information faster than before. I felt more confident when taking tests, and I wasn't second-guessing myself. Reviewing really made all the difference.
Step 4. Study. Throughout the week, it is important to make connections and integrate new content. Reinforce this content by reading text materials, working problems, making flashcards, creating concept maps, etc. To reach higher levels of learning, ask yourself how, why, and what if questions. To help you manage your study time more efficiently, incorporate several intense study sessions throughout the day. These are 30 to 50-minute sessions with a focused goal and purpose. Step 5. Assess. Assessing is the process of evaluating your understanding of new material. It helps you answer the question, where do I need to focus? Periodic assessment will help you realign your methods of learning. To recap, the study cycle is a process for learning based on how your brain learns best. With it, you can reach the highest levels of your learning potential and maximize performance in the classroom.
Okay, so what I want you to do is in the content section, download the Module 5 homework, and the first question is going to ask you which of the 5 steps of the study cycle do you currently do. So go ahead and be honest and write down which steps you currently do, and if you do all 5 of them, great, but if you don't do everything, then go ahead and make a note of that. And then let's assume you don't do all 5. What's one step that you don't do, and how do you think you could implement that step? What is something that extra you could do, something that fits with your schedule? All right, so take about a minute, and you can pause the video right now and do the activity, or like I said, if you really want to wait to the end of the video, you can also do it then. All right, so I want to point on a couple things that they mentioned in that video. The first is preview. Now, many people, you've heard this probably from professors, it's pre-read. They ask you to read the chapter ahead of time. Well, you know, we all know that you guys don't have time for that. Many people cannot sit and read a whole chapter before class. They just don't have the time. But in reality, that's not what you have to do. Preview is not pre-reading. Preview is just being familiar with stuff that you're going to see in lecture. And it really actually helps you follow along in lecture. And so if you don't preview, and you often find yourself lost in lectures, try to preview. We'll just do one day and try it. I bet you'll actually be able to follow the lecture a lot more, and your notes actually make more sense, and things are just more familiar. And let me show you an example of what you would do during a preview. So here's a page out of a textbook in Bio 1, and you see that we have some bold print words here. We have some figures that they're referring to. So all you have to do when you preview is look at the figure and read the figure legend and look at what the figure is saying. So this figure is talking about the plasma membrane structure, and it's a lipid bilayer. You have a hydrophilic, hydrophobic, hydrophilic. So you're using words here, and if you don't know what those words are, when you're previewing, just go take your phone out and Google them, right? And then you can learn what the words are. Then read the figure legend about what the figure is talking about. That takes you about 10 seconds, 15 seconds probably per figure. And in most chapters that you're going over in a lecture, there's maybe 20 figures, okay, so not long. Then, if you already don't know the definitions, look at every single bold print definition and look up its definition, all right, and just understand what that word means. And that's it. That's previewing. So for most chapters, it's going to take you 5 to 10 minutes. So if you arrive to class early, while you're waiting in your car or waiting for the class to begin in class, you can pull your book out and actually preview. And the science is by just understanding these terms, when the professor uses them, you've already familiarized yourself with them. Where if you have never seen these terms before, and then a professor uses the terms in class when you're supposed to be taking notes, you might get lost in what the term means, and the professor's telling you things about what it means, and you're kind of just all confused because you didn't even know what the word meant to begin with. So it's just a way of basically giving you a foundation that you can then build upon while you're in class, and it really works well for students. And so be aware, this will only cost you a few minutes every single day, and you can preview. The other thing I want to point out in that video was the study part of the study cycle. So many people, when they study, they'll go to the library and study for 5 hours straight. Well, the problem with that is your brain cannot handle 5 hours of studying straight. And so typically what happens is the first hour, your studying is pretty productive, and then every hour after that you actually become less productive and less efficient. And so in reality, if you're doing a cram session, you're most likely wasting time because you're not actually learning efficiently. If you break your studying up into what are called intense study sessions, which are basically 1 hour increments, you become very efficient. So instead of studying 3 hours straight, if you did 3 separate intense study sessions throughout the day, maybe one in the morning, one in the afternoon, one at night, or maybe one in the afternoon and a couple at night with breaks in between, all right, then this is a very efficient way of studying. So this is also called the power hour. And I like this format because you do it very strategically, and you can actually study more efficiently. So for the first 5 minutes, It may not take you 5 minutes to do this, but you have to set a goal, and you have to set a very specific goal. It can't be like study organic chemistry. It has to be, figure out these 5 synthesis pathways or something like that. So the key for that is to be very specific. The next step is 40 minutes long, and you're basically going to study. You're going to do what you said you were going to do. You have to do something with action, so that means you have to either rewrite your notes or summarize things in the textbook or read or make notes with them, and you have to focus. So the key here, and my biggest recommendation for 40 minutes, turn your phone off completely for 40 minutes. No one will go away, or at least put it on vibrate. Try and shut your email down. This should be 40 minutes uninterrupted, all right? Otherwise, again, you're just going to be wasting time. This is my favorite part. After the 45 minutes you've been studying, take an 8-minute break. So this is the time you can turn your phone back on and catch up on whatever you missed. And then that break gives your brain a chance to rest, and then you're going to finish the hour with a 7-minute review of what you have just studied. So maybe your goal was to go over 4 synthesis pathways in organic. You did that, you studied them, and then you made them and rewrote them in a variety of ways. You took a break, and then to review, your job is mainly to try and come up with it from the top of your head or quiz yourself on it or assess. All right, so that's an intense study session, 1 hour. And then you stop. You take a pretty long break, half an hour break, hour break. Don't do 2 study sessions right next to each other because you're going to be tired, or you might be tired. All right, at least give yourself a little bit of break and then do another intense study session. So let's say, for example, you're studying 3 hours a day, all at night, from 10 o'clock to 1 in the morning or something like that. If you can instead find 3 uninterrupted hours in the day that you can schedule these study sessions, you're actually going to be more efficient in those 3 hours. Okay, so this is a really nice way of studying. Okay, so part of studying is just one piece of the puzzle in doing well in classes. Another part is very important, is note-taking. It's really important to be able to take very good notes, and that way you don't miss anything, and that way you understand the professor is trying to get across, and you can study strategically for the exam. Because there's lots of things professors say, lots of words they use, lots of them you don't even need to know, but some are very important. You have to key in on what's important and what's not important in the class. So this is activity 2. So what I want you to do again is pause the video, and hopefully you have some notes laying around, all right, from a class you're taking now or a previous class you took in the previous semester, and actually go find your notes and look through them. And try to identify one thing that you think is really good about your notes, and what do you think there's a weakness in your notes. And if you don't have any notes, just try off the top of your head, think about your own note-taking style. What's one thing that you do really well when you take notes, and what's one thing that you wish you could do better when you are taking your notes? And then the second part of the activity is, in general, if you were going to explain to, say, an incoming freshman how to take good notes, what would be 3 characteristics of good note-taking? Okay, so again, pause the video, do activity number 2, and when you're done with that, you can restart the video. All right, so I'm going to show you a video of a note-taking method that maybe some of you have heard, maybe some of you have not heard. This is called Cornell Notes. And this is a really nice note-taking method because it basically encompasses a lot of things at once. All right, and so I'm going to show you this video, and then afterwards I'm going to focus on what I think is really important about Cornell Notes.
Cornell Notes is a method to help you record, review, and reflect on information you will need later. Refer to this presentation to learn about or refresh your memory about this tool. You will be using the Cornell Notes packet throughout this course to prepare for the final project. As you can see, the page has specific areas laid out for the 5 R's of the Cornell Notes process. First, you record in this section. During the lesson, record in the main column as many meaningful facts, ideas, and concepts as you can. Next, you reduce or summarize in the skinny section. Summarize facts, ideas, and concepts in the Q column. The third step is to recite. Cover the note-taking area using only your jottings in the Q column to say over the facts and ideas of the lecture as fully as you can, not mechanically, but in your own words. Then verify what you've said. Reflection is an important part of the learning process. In this part, you can also write your goal for that element, which we'll talk more about later. And finally, you can review, spending 10 minutes every week in quick review of your notes, and you'll retain most of what you've learned. So if we were to take notes from the first presentation on digital citizenship, the page might look something like this. You would record meaningful facts or definitions in this side, and then you would reduce it to the term that you're trying to memorize. Finally, you can then write a reflection, summary, or your goal at the bottom of the page, and then you review and recite as needed.
Okay, so here's an example of Cornell Notes that I kind of made in a 5-minute lecture on microscopy. So this is a lecture we typically give in introductory biology courses and also in the cell biology courses on microscopy. And basically what we have are some parameters of microscopy, so there are 3 microscopy parameters, and I list these under the key point section of the Cornell Notes on the left-hand side. And these are basically your key terms: magnification, resolution, and contrast. On the right-hand side is the details section. So this is where you would put in the definition for the term, maybe some highlight things. You can see here I had a star and wrote, "Missed this definition, fill it in later." So many times a professor might be speaking really fast and you can't fill in all the notes. If you can't catch up, what you can do is just start writing down very simple key points. And then your job later during your study time is to fill in the details, because the details are always going to be there. They're going to be in your textbook or they're going to be online, all right? But the key points, the things that the professor thinks are really important, are what you really want to capture within class. So don't sweat the details if you can't get them in time. And sometimes students like to just not take notes too much because they need to pay attention. They prefer to sit and pay attention to the lecture. And so you can just write down key points and know that you have to go back and fill those in later. All right. You can also see I wrote some questions here about how, like I was confused about something, so you can actually make notes of what you still don't know about on the details section. And then one of the largest strengths for Cornell Notes at the bottom is the summary section. And this is the part of the study cycle called review. So within 24 hours of class, you should review your notes, and they actually help you learn your material better by looking at them within 24 hours. Many students will just take notes, go to class, close it, and then they won't even open the notes again until the next class. And so you actually don't even review your notes until many weeks later. And in fact, what happens is those weeks that went by without reviewing your notes, you've lost a lot of that memory of what you were learning in that lecture. The summary section is what you need to do. You need to basically take all the details and the key terms and try to summarize them in your own words in about a sentence or two. And so you can see here we have 3 microscopy parameters, and there's some definitions of these key terms. And so the summary here is light microscopy is characterized by 3 parameters: magnification, how big an image is; resolution, ability to see 2 separate images; and contrast, brightness between background. So very succinctly, I was able to summarize all of this detail. All right, and this is really nice because then when you review your notes from the past, all you have to do is read your summaries. Just flip through your notebook and read your summaries, and you'll keep track of what you're learning, and you'll be refreshing all this information in your mind so that when you actually go to study it and try and memorize it, it'll be easier to memorize because of the fact that this is all fresh in your brain. All right, so it's a very nice way. Cornell Notes also gives you a way of testing yourself. So you can cover up the details section and quiz yourself on what these terms mean. Right? Or you can just basically try and read the summary or guess or make your own summaries over again. So for those of you who like to rewrite your notes, if you do the summary section, you can rewrite your notes there and summarize in your own words. So like I said, if this is attractive to you, I would definitely try it. You don't have to get the template, although I did post a template on eLearning so you can print it out. You can actually just take a notebook and draw an upside down T, or offset T essentially, in your notebook, and you can make your own homemade Cornell Notes. And in fact, many notebooks are now sold that have this format in them already. All right, so it's a really nice note-taking method if you're looking for new ways of taking notes. Okay, so basic tips about note-taking, and this is a really important skill, and don't worry if you're not good at it. This is something that you have to develop over time. All right? Everyone who has taken good notes has developed this over time. No one knows how to take them straight off the bat. So a couple of things. Concentrate on the lecture or the reading. So obviously, if you're in class, you're there for the lecture. Focus on what the professor is saying. The professor should be highlighting the important parts of the content. What do they value as important? So here's the biggest piece of advice I can give you. Do not write everything down the professor says or puts on PowerPoint, so take notes selectively. The average lecturer speaks 125 to 140 words per minute. You can only write about 25 words per minute. All right, so you're not going to be able to catch up. So use those keywords and basically skip a lot of the words that the professor's using and just write in shorthand. You can fill it in later. And more importantly, if your professor gives you PowerPoints and makes them available, you don't have to write what's on the PowerPoint. It's going to be available to you later. So you can leave a space for that and just fill it in at your own time. And that way you can focus more on taking notes on what's being said and not on what's on the PowerPoint. Now, if the professor does not give you PowerPoints, then you have to be selective and try and find out on the PowerPoints what words do you need to get down onto your piece of paper, what words can you skip. Use your own words. So don't try and write down what the professor says, because sometimes they might use words you don't even know. All right, so use your own words of what they're trying to say. Obviously, if they're using key terms that you recognize from your previewing, you can use those. Be brief. You don't want to write down everything, long sentences. You want to focus on major points and important information. This is one really important part about taking notes. Write legibly, but I only say it has to be legible to you. So as long as you can read your own handwriting, you're fine. And then don't worry about grammar or spelling. Don't get hung up on the details. All your job during lecture is just to try and copy down the ideas so that you can go back and take them and then convert them into your own memory. All right. All right, so how do you know whether a professor says something really important or not? There's actually lots of tips and tidbits that professors do to try and emphasize to you importance of a concept. So usually, instructors might pause before or after an important idea. And usually if there's a big pause, the professor's trying to give you time to write that down. So be aware that if everyone else is writing and you're not writing down something, you probably want to start writing down what was said. Many times the professor uses the board to write examples, PowerPoints, or so on. You want to write those down. All right. So obviously, if they give you PowerPoints, you don't have to write that down during the lecture. You can go fill it in later. But if they're writing things on the board, write them down, because they're going to erase that board at the end of the class, and you're going to lose those notes. Many times instructors will repeat themselves. Something that's very important, I'll probably say 3 to 5 times in a lecture. And you'll use words like "this is very important." So when you hear those things, you want to write them down. And like I just said, they'll also use introductory phrases. So a point to remember, or something that's very critical here. When they use the word critical, that's really important. You want to write it down. Or they may just say, hey, I'm going to ask this on the exam. Know this. And if they say know this, write it down. Okay, so you really want to listen to what the professor is saying. If the professor says, you don't have to know this, but, right? They're just telling you a fact because they want you to be interested in it. So that may be something that you don't have to write down if you don't want to. All right, I'm not going to go through all these individually, but here's a list of some signal words. There are many words that instructors use that will signal to you either main ideas or supporting materials. So main ideas are things that you definitely need to know. Supporting materials are basically examples or evidences of the main idea. So there are 3 reasons why, when professors state, like for example, the microscopy example, I was saying there were 3 parameters of microscopy, right? That's an introductory signal word for, hey, this is going to be one of the really important main points of microscopy. You need to know these, right? So, and most important, major development, those type of phrasings tell you that you should be paying attention. Supporting materials, so things like, for example, for instance, also, in addition, these are just extra examples. Now, you have to kind of figure out what your course is going to require. Your professor might need you to know all these as well. But a lot of times they need you to know the main ideas, and the extra examples are just for your own benefit. So you want to be aware of that. But this will tell you what's the main idea and what's the supporting material or information of that lecture. Conclusions or summaries, you guys know this probably from reading books and things. If the professor says therefore or in conclusion or finally, you know that's a concluding statement. Usually professors will summarize their main points over again, so repetition, by summarizing what they've just said. So if you hear in summary or again in conclusion, you want to pay attention and write down what's going to be said after that, because that's probably concluding or summarizing a very important fact. And then a lot of times professors will raise their voice when something is really important. So listen to the phrasing. If they say the basic concept here is, this means everything I've told you is important, but if you basically have to know this first, the basic concept. So you're not going to be able to memorize all these phrasings when you're in lecture, but the more you're in lecture and the more you understand what professors are saying and getting used to their lecture style, you can then figure out whether what they're saying is important or not important. All right. So if they're saying like, this is a very important fact, please pay attention, you obviously want to pay attention. If they're just telling you a random story because they think you're interested, more than likely they're not going to test you on that, and you don't probably have to take notes on that. Obviously, if you're ever unsure about what you need to know or not know, I would definitely ask your professor, hey, when you say things like this, is that something I should be paying attention to, or is that something that you're going to test us on, or is it something that's supplementary? All right, so I'm going to leave the slide up for a little bit so you can maybe pause the video and take down some of these references, but there are lots of references, websites, and supports out there for note-taking. So if you want to get better at becoming a better note-taker, there are plenty of materials, so just be aware of that. All right, last thing we're going to discuss in this module is your study environment. So you need to study. The study cycle will help you study efficiently, all right? You need to take good notes when you're in lecture. So obviously that part of the study cycle, attend, is the most important. In fact, most students who fail don't attend. It's just a perfect correlation. So if you're not even attending class, you have to go to class. That's the first step. So if a student comes to me and they're doing poorly and I know they're not attending, I don't even bother talking about note-taking because I say, hey, just come to class first and then we can worry about note-taking. Right? That's the first step. Note-taking is the second step. You got to take really good notes. You need to know what to take and what to study from. So previewing and reviewing help you to analyze your notes and what material is important to study and what material is not important. The last thing that's important is how are you studying and where are you studying? So how and where you study are actually some of the biggest determinants of how well you'll do in class. All right. If you're constantly studying in a noisy environment, you're actually not learning very well in that environment. So what I want you to do again is pause the video and go back to the homework assignment, and in activity number 3, just describe your typical study environment. So I don't need to know, what you're wearing and things like that, but describe what's around you, where are you, your typical study environment. So where are you studying most of the time? Is there any electronics on? Is your cell phone around? Is the TV on? Is something in the background? Is someone talking? Those type of things, all right? And then also describe what is your biggest challenge while studying. So what is something that you always struggle with that prevents you from studying more efficiently? And before you do this, the reason I'm asking you these questions is that these are part of these metacognition activities. These are things that you need to analyze or else you're not going to improve. If you have a big challenge that you constantly battle while studying, but yet you don't ever assess it or address it, right, you can't fix it. So you have to identify the challenge first in order to effectively figure out a strategy for that challenge. All right. So go ahead, do activity 3, and then we'll conclude with how you study. Okay, so I'm going to show you a video that deals with some of our challenges that we have when we study or try and focus on a single task, and then I'll talk about it.
Well, the study was inspired by the idea that we saw more and more kids on campus and, of course, all around the country multitasking. And if you look at classical psychology textbooks, they tell you people can't multitask. It's psychologically impossible. So on the one hand, we had this clear statement, look, people can't multitask, and on the other, we had people multitasking like crazy.
I think it's unrealistic to do one thing at a time, but it's just the way things are, you kind of have to multitask.
Thanks for coming in. So in this task, you'll basically be looking at different rectangles that are going to be presented. You'll be red and blue rectangles, and they either change orientation or they won't. And as soon as you brought in the high multitaskers, the more blue rectangles you brought in, the more distractions. Even though we clearly told them that these were completely irrelevant, they couldn't help paying attention to them.
We really don't know what's happening other than that they seem to like to be flooded with information. It's almost as if they prefer to scan the environment, just constantly scan and grab new information, rather than ponder what they have. We don't know whether there are advantages to that, but so far we haven't found any.
You a good multitasker?
I thought I was. I'm not so sure after this study, but I do listen to music and chat with my friends all the time at the same time.
To our absolute shock, we found that in any of the categories of activities that we thought their brain would be better at, that would enable them to manage multiple streams of information at one time, they're actually worse at all of them. So it's a great mystery what the heck is going on. Right now what we can say is multitaskers are lousy in multitasking.
All right, so as you can see from that video, basically humans can't multitask, even though many people require us to, or we think it's a benefit. So the key here for studying is go back to the intent study sessions. 50 or an hour, 60 minutes, 1 hour of uninterrupted time. It's got to be uninterrupted, because the second you start trying to multitask or interrupt your study time with other activities, essentially what will happen is you will lose that momentum, and actually studies have shown that you don't remember what you previously just read. So if you were reading a chapter from a book and then you got a text message from a friend, that text message interrupted your memory, and you would probably have to go back and reread that paragraph again. So you're basically spending more time studying because of these distractions. So again, you can study way more efficiently and actually save time. Some other practical study tips. Sometimes finding a study buddy, so someone to study with, will hold you accountable, will help prevent distractions. You guys can focus and help test each other. It depends on your places of study. If when you wrote down where you study and you find that your biggest challenge is things like the TV or a computer or so on, then you want to find a different place to study where there aren't those distractions. So the library here, the PACE library, has lots of study environments for you. You can reserve rooms, study corrals essentially. You can reserve them for a whole semester if you want at a given day and time. There's the quiet floor on the, I'm forgetting, but I think it's the 3rd floor. Or 4th floor, where basically it's mandatory quiet, no one can talk. So it's a very nice quiet area. You can also reserve smart boards, so kind of dry erase boards that are you can hook up to your computer, and you can kind of walk through problem sets and things like that. There's lots of places to study on campus. There's lots of places, just think of coffee shops maybe, other places that you might want to study that might be better for you than your current study location. Location is very important actually, because if you can find a reliable place to study, you can be more efficient that way. As I've been mentioning throughout this entire module, you need to schedule study time. If you have 4 hours free in a day, you're going to say, I got 4 hours this afternoon, I'm going to study then. But in reality, if you didn't schedule it, you're going to have lots of other commitments or distractions that might pop up that will take away from your study time. So how many times have we said, I'm going to study from 2 to 5 p.m. today, and then you realize it's 3 o'clock and you're doing something else and you lost track of time and you're not even studying at all. So you have to almost create study time as like a class. Put it in your schedule at a regular time, even set an alarm for it, and then go ahead and stick to it. And then this is key, you have to turn off electronics. Now granted, part of your study session may involve online homework. So if that's the case, you're going to have a computer on. But try and turn off your emails and turn off all your social media notifications and things like that, because that's just going to distract you. Again, you're spending more time if you have these electronics on distracting you. So a 60-minute study session that is uninterrupted is almost equivalent to like a 3-hour study session with interruptions. All right, so you're saving lots and lots of time. Okay, other resources. So part of your homework is going to be to look at a UWF student resource guide that I'm going to give you on e-learning, and pick something there that you could take advantage of. But I will point to you, the Academic Center for Excellence is where you're going to find all the tutoring sessions. So we have free tutors for you for any course you want. And you basically make an appointment through ACE. ACE is the Academic Center for Excellence, and if you go on My UWF and search in Academic Center for Excellence, you'll find how to schedule a tutor appointment. The tutors are there, they get paid for it, so it's their job to help you out. And you can come to the tutoring session. You can make it a regularly scheduled thing once a week to get help. So be aware there's lots of resources available for you for your academic success. You're not on your own. So if you're struggling with a course, maybe a chemistry course or a biology course, there are tutors that will just help you go over things with you to help you revisit. Maybe if you need to go over your notes or you're not sure about certain concepts, there are people that will help you with that. On the handout I'm going to give you or provide on e-learning, the tutor schedule is for spring 2016 because that was the last semester we were in. But be aware that on the website for Academic Center for Excellence, they'll post their schedules. And the way they're doing it now is you can just request an appointment within those scheduled times. So they're pretty flexible with tutoring, so if you have a tough schedule, you can still fit in some tutoring there somehow. Okay, and then the final statement for this, to wrap up this module, is the bottom line, though, is it does require time. So like I said, if the first step of the game, if you're not studying at all, or if you're not putting enough time in, that's why you're not going to get the grades. But if you're putting the time in and you're still not getting the grades you want, start looking at what you're doing. How are you studying? Where are you studying? Are you doing those 5 steps of the study cycle? Are you reviewing your notes periodically? Or are you just waiting to cram a couple days before the exam? And the definition of insanity that Einstein has given is doing the same thing over and over again, expecting different results, is insanity. And that's the point, is if you're doing the same thing and you're getting the poor grades no matter what, you're not happy with the grades you're getting, try something different. Try one of these strategies, or go online and Google how to study, and you will find a lot of different ideas. There's more than one way, and as we said in Module 4, every student is a different learner. You have different strengths and weaknesses, different ways of learning than other people. So what worked for some person might not work for you. All right? So you have to put the uninterrupted time in. Okay, so your homework is, you mostly did your homework, and if you didn't do it while we were doing the video lecture, you can go ahead and do it now, is those 3 activities where I had you kind of identify how you're studying, your note-taking, study cycle things. The last part of your homework is really easy. If you go to the content section, you'll see under the Module 5 a PDF called UWF Resources for Academic Success. So what I want you to do is download that and look through that. There's lots of examples of things there's things like the writing lab and the math lab and the career services, and lots of things that will help you for your courses. And all I want you to do is pick 2 things, so identify 2 things that you can do to get extra help. Summarize their location, where would you find them, so what website or what building are they in? Who would you contact? Is there an email address? How do you register for it? And if possible, there might not be dates for this, but if there are, what are the dates? Are there dates available for things, or what do you do? All right, so summarize how you can take advantage of that. And the reason I do this is just to show you all the things that UWF has available for you for your success that you can take advantage of. And many times students are not aware of it to begin with. And so knowing where to find these things is really important, because you might have a bad week and you might need help in catching up, or you don't understand some of your organic chemistry homework and you need help with that. There's help for you out there. All right, so after this module, go ahead and take Module 5 quiz. And remember that these quizzes are open books, so if you need to go back to the video, there's no time limit, you can do so. And then go ahead and submit your Module 5 homework to the Dropbox. The only thing I need is the actual homework itself. The UWF Resources handout and the Cornell Notes handout is for your own information. If you want to print them out and keep them for your benefit, that's fine, but you don't have to hand them in. Okay, let me know if you have any questions, email me. Otherwise, I will see you in the next module.